So you have invested $500,000 into learning and personal development. What's the most valuable lesson or experience you got from this?
Yeah, man, it's a great question. I think the key to learning is to implement. It doesn't matter what you learn or how much you learn or how much you spent to invest in these different sources of learning that you need to implement. Otherwise, it's a waste of money. The statistics of people investing in a course and not even opening it. I think the statistics are like 30% of people that buy a course don't actually log in. And there's 60% of people log in but don't complete. And it's literally 10% of people who invest in a course actually complete the course.
Wow.
So imagine the percentage of people that complete and actually implement. That's going to be even smaller. So regardless, whatever you invest your time or energy or focus or money in, make sure it's worthwhile and invest, complete, and implement so that you can actually develop skills, not just knowledge. All right? Because knowledge is one thing, but knowledge with action and implementation, that's where the power comes.
Are there any specific resources or let's see how I could phrase this. Any specific strategies? Do you have any specific strategies or tools that you learned over time?
In relation to what?
The $500,000 you invested.
The strategies of what has been most effective for me? I would say two key categories. Number one is around psychology of human behavior. And number two would be marketing and business growth.
Okay.
All right. So
So
the business strategies are linked to growing a business, establishing a team, leadership, marketing, lead gen, conversions. That whole area of lead gen is super powerful because it doesn't matter how good your business is. If people don't know about it and you can't close, you can't generate leads, then you don't have a business. And the second part is, of course, the delivery of your services. So you need to be able to understand your customers' needs, what problems they have, and you need to have a solution that you're incredibly confident with that you know can help those clients solve those problems.
and why do you have such a love for learning?
Because learning is the mother of success, right? You've got to continuously be resourceful to seek new information, new tools, new learning. And for me, it's not something I have to do. It's fun. I'm always curious. That's why I ask lots of questions. That's why I'm always seeking what's next? What could I do to improve? How could I better support my clients? How can I create a world-class team?
What's your favorite thing to learn about?
Self-development, I guess, would be it. I've been a sponge for growth, learning, and self-development for 30 years. And it's definitely been a never-ending process, right? It's a pursuit to develop ourselves, to learn skills, to develop and improve the lives of others. And, if we stop learning, then we're dying. We're going backwards. We're not
Right.
evolving. So we become stuck and complacent and average, and we get left behind. And for me, that's not an option.
Okay, so on a different subject, you were
Okay.
born in Australia and
Yeah.
you started your first business at 8 years old, right?
I started working at 8. It was probably the first business was around 11.
Okay. And then as you got older through college, you started traveling more. And then now you're settled in Thailand. So could you tell us more about your backstory and the process of how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I had an amazing upbringing, all right, very loving family, and I'm very fortunate for that. My parents immigrated from England to Australia before I was born. So that was in 1970. So they did the hard yards. I've seen them start from nothing and just grind and evolve and just keep improving, moving to a new suburb with a new house in a better location and just getting through. And so when I was young, we didn't travel much as a family, right? We didn't have a lot of holidays. So I'd always just had this massive hunger and drive to want to travel. So when I started working when I was young, because I wanted to, right? I was hungry. I wanted to be active. Then you start to learn the value and appreciate what money gives you because it gives you choices, options, opportunity. You become self sufficient. So you become very independent. And so I enjoyed working because it was always in the service industry, even at that age. I was delivering a service, it was customer service. And it's a very fulfilling, rewarding way to generate independence. So that was really my drive throughout primary school and high school, was working to generate more, that I had full independence. I had options and I had full control over how I chose to live my life, even at that young age. So I really didn't have any intentions to go to university until my second last year of high school. And that's when they introduced this physical education. So you started learning around anatomy and going into the health sciences. And it was only then that I really thought and considered to actually go to university, which was, I was fortunate enough to be accepted and I got into university. So I thought, all right, I'll do college. And then when I'm finished, I'll start my traveling. But of course, you finish college, you get offered a great opportunity. And then I decided to work for 1 and then 2 years. But at that 2 year mark is when I said, okay, it's time. I'm done. So I packed up, sold my cars, did everything, and bought a one-way ticket to Europe. And that's what started this lifelong passion and journey of traveling the world. So
Okay, so
it
you
started from a
traveled.
vision.
Wow.
Mm.
So you traveled to over 60 countries, experiencing different cultures and unique perspectives. What's one thing that you learned from traveling the world?
The biggest takeaway is the people with the least are probably the most happiest.
Really?
Yeah, that's the biggest takeaway. So
Could
whether
you
it's
expand
in,
on
yeah, whether it's in Thailand or Nepal, Sri Lanka, India, Southeast Asia, Mexico even, you've got people that have the least. I'll give you an example of when I was in India. Incredible poverty. They don't know any different, but they have unity and they have community and they have each other. But they welcome you into their life, into their arms, and they will give you their last piece of naan, which is bread. They are incredibly generous and gracious and respectful, and they're just happy. It doesn't mean they wouldn't be more happy if they had more, but they have no expectations from others. And I've seen this across the world in, especially Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, and these more developing nations. Right?
Wow.
Very humble. And they're just doing their best to get by in life. So
So how did that affect your life?
Well, number one, you start to be a lot more grateful for what you have, which I'm fortunate that I always have done.
Yep.
And over the years, I collect less, I buy less, I become more minimalist. And so you get to simplify your life as well, because you realize that cars and houses and property, like you have enough to be comfortable and have a great life and to be financially free. But it's not about the materialistic possessions that actually gives you happiness or to be content.
Okay. So back to your business, your first business. What business was that actually?
So my first job was delivering papers. I was a paper boy, all right, doing the paper round. And when the job first came up, I applied. It wasn't in the street that I lived, but it was in adjacent street. So very close, just a few down. So I decided to do that. And obviously, my dad helped. But on some days, in addition to the stack of newspapers that would be delivered at your letterbox by the truck for you to go and deliver, on some days you would also get a stack of flyers, whether that's from a supermarket or a local business. And so we would then have to then deliver the flyers as well. All right. So the advertising. And some flyers would be delivered separately. Some would actually be included in the newspaper itself. And that got me thinking. So what's the difference? Obviously, the advertisers that have inserts into the newspaper are probably paying more. And then I thought from the customer's perspective, how would they perceive it different? Because there's two things. Have you ever seen a letterbox that actually says no junk mail? All right, so some letterboxes, they actually have a sticker and a label that says no junk mail, which means don't post your flyers and your brochures in my letterbox, please.
Okay.
So if you're going to do that, it's going to be considered junk mail, right? This is the first perception. Whereas if it was placed inside the newspaper, well, it must be, I think it gives instant credibility, number one, and you have a higher chance of it being read and looked at. Okay, so you're increasing your exposure. My dad was a printer, all right, so he had a printing business. So the idea was that we would print flyers, just a basic flyer and brochure for landscaping. Because obviously I'm 11 years old. What can I do?
Yeah.
But every single day I'm delivering newspapers and I get to see people with gardens and lawn that hasn't been taken care of. So they're obviously not taking care of their environment and their garden themselves. So I thought, well, that's something I could do. I can borrow dad's tools until I can generate enough money to buy my own. And I can print some flyers and put it in the newspaper and see what happens. So of course, that's what we did. And the first week, we get a phone call. Now, back then, we didn't have mobile phones. So they would have to ring my house that still had that phone that was connected to a wall
Yeah.
with big curly telephone line. And that's how I started to generate money, all right, on that income in that business. So sometimes I would have to take dad's shears and the equipment and the lawnmower and push the lawnmower on the footpath or along the road for maybe 2 kilometers to get to somebody's house. And I would cut their grass and trim their gardens and do basic landscaping and lawn care.
How'd
But of
that
course,
go for you?
yeah, it was great. I was able to charge a good rate, and I would just have I think we had two prices back then. We had a price per hour, or I would give a quote on the size of the lawn and what else they wanted to do. So a bit of an a la carte basic menu, cutting grass and just shears. So not full landscaping. And that's
What
what I started doing.
lessons? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I started doing.
So what lessons did you actually learn from that you can still apply to your business today?
Well, unless you can increase exposure, unless people know that your service exists, you won't get customers. That's the first one. And of course, you need to be willing to do the work.
Right.
3, you need to deliver a high quality of work and have good customer service.
Okay.
And from there, and the feedback and being personable and having a personal connection with your customers, then you're more likely to be able to retain those customers and get referrals. So from that level of service, I can't remember exactly what the correlation was, but my customer service within delivering a newspaper wasn't throwing a newspaper from my BMX bike. It wasn't just putting the newspaper in a letterbox neatly. But when it was raining, if there were tenants, right, homeowners that I knew were elderly or had a really small letterbox, I would actually run. So in Australia, in the suburbs, you've got really long driveways, right? You've got big properties. And so I would actually go and put their newspaper at their doormat undercover so it would be dry.
Mhm.
Because there's nothing worse than having a soggy newspaper.
Right.
And I would assume, my assumption is that it's probably some of those that actually took me on to cut their grass as well. And at the end of the year, you get Christmas tips. So if you deliver great service during the year, then you get a bonus from these people that are very grateful for your high level of service. So
So it
it is
probably makes it
all
really work.
around customer service. Yeah, for sure. So that is the biggest learning, is customer service is everything. Quality of service and getting the word out so that people know that you exist.
Okay. So now your business is Aspire Coaching. Could you tell us more about it and what your vision is with the business?
Sure. So that's our brick and mortar business. The company is called Fitcorp, and it's a Fitcorp group. So we have a group of different brands and business units. But I originally started the business to focus on corporate wellness. So employee engagement and integrating health into culture, leadership, performance, happiness, productivity, all of those areas. And that was back in the early 2000s. So we're well past that. And we were just a little bit too early, probably 20 years ahead of our time. So again, it's a great business lesson, because you can have a great idea with the best intentions and believe that it is important and needed, but that doesn't mean the business is going to do well. So you've heard the saying, the early bird gets the worm.
Yep.
Is that always true?
I guess not.
No. So the second mouse gets the cheese. So imagine if you have a pioneering business idea, you're going to spend a lot of time having to educate the market and the audience and to test and to see what works. And in this case, I didn't have the time or the resources to spend in educating. So I was looking for alternatives of what is needed and in demand and would be popular now. And that's when I started the personal training business. So we were
Okay.
the first personal training business in Thailand at that time.
Wow. So what problems are you currently solving in people's lives?
For clients, well, people are looking to live well, live actively, be pain-free, and be energized so that they can live a long and high quality lifestyle. And there's a lot of challenges that prevent people from achieving that goal and that lifestyle that they seek. There's, since the internet, there's a ton of information and misinformation, and people get confused and they try random things. They try and do things on their own. And that's where people seek the guidance and insight of an expert or a coach in this field to help them navigate, to be consistent on the right things that leads them to the results that they want, that helps them become the best version of themselves. Confident, healthy, energized, and proactive in their future self.
Okay, so can you share a success story of one of your patients that was having problems in their personal or professional life?
Sure. So I can share a client that I still work with today. We've been working for 4 or 5 years, I think now.
Okay.
And this guy was an absolute mess. Stress, health, habits, beliefs, and the only way that he knew how to get through something was to throw himself into the deep end and be such a state of discomfort that he was forced to do something about it. Right? So I would call that a forcing function, but this is a very extreme forcing function.
Okay.
And of course, he was overweight and unhealthy and didn't sleep much, like very poor systems across the board. So he came to me saying, I need some help. I've I've registered for a a karate tournament, and I'm not prepared. And I said, sure. Okay, so when is the tournament? This karate tournament? And he said in 3 weeks. So that was my first experience with him. And we worked super hard for 3 weeks on lots of things: nutrition, sleep, training, resilience, mindset, becoming fearless. So it was like a crash intensive course in life, I think it was, to try and get him prepared. And he turned up and he won a couple of rounds and he did good. I mean, he wasn't doing it to expect to win, but he was doing it to force himself to break patterns and to be uncomfortable and to achieve something that he didn't think was possible. After that, he got off track and he started, going back into the old cycles. And then he reached out again about a year or a year and a half later. And it was like, Dan, I've got another goal. But of course, he had lots of work to do. So that's when we really started working together intensively. And this guy went from that state of chaos in his life where he would be committed to a particular outcome in a goal, but he would get drawn back into that chaos of life that I may not have heard from him for weeks. Like he's literally missing in action, won't reply to messages, no contact, no follow-up, no nothing, just disappear. And that would literally be weeks at a time. And so this whole process now, he is now at a state of, we've still got a long way to go, but he has come so far, right? With his health, prioritizing exercise, building systems, learning how to intercept triggers and stresses, even being able to intercept, we'll say, difficult situations related to relationships or leadership. And instead of losing his cool or reacting verbally, he is in full control of his emotions and he knows what his triggers are. And he is just in a continuous process of growth, development, and learning. And it is just magic to see where he is today, right? From where he was a few years ago, even to the point where his wife had said to him recently, who is this guy? Like, this is not the man that I used to know. Where did he come from? And what have you been doing to change and evolve in such a positive, empowered manner?
How does that feel as a mentor to be able to help someone and see change in somebody.
It's everything. It's why we do what we do, is to help that person have those breakthroughs and actually change the direction of their life. And to get the feedback from a close partner or wife or whoever it might be, that is all part of the ripple effect, right? So you know the impact that you have on one individual is going to have a positive impact on many people in their life, right? Young kids, as far as a father and someone that they look up to and that they're proud and they're learning how to be a great person of society as they grow into teenagers and then adults, and the influence that that has on their colleagues or their staff, right? I had another client where we'd been working on his health side of things as well, because he always went the hardcore approach, right? All or nothing, right? All in, do the grind, do the work. But of course, that might work when you're in your 20s and 30s. But when you get into 50s, things change. Number one, it's hard to get that motivation to just push yourself and grind it out. And they start seeking a different approach. Now, some of the strategies that we'd worked on, his junior staff started mimicking and following what he did because they're smart. They look at him going, huh, he's achieved all these results in just a couple of months or a few months. And this is what he's doing. So maybe we should do that too. Right. And whether that was around nutrition or exercise or prioritizing time in the middle of his day to go and exercise, that is the power of influence. Not because you tell people what to do, because you're leading by example and people are observing and watching what results are led, and they start wanting to do that as well. That's powerful.
What advice would you give someone who's trying to create a ripple effect of impact on the world?
Start with one person, one problem, one person. Systemize your approach so that you establish a formula that is valid and reliable and repeatable, and you focus on one person at a time.
That's great advice. So let's talk about blind spots. So, what are some common blind spots you've seen across like entrepreneurs and different professionals in the industry?
The blind spot is not knowing when to actually seek help. And I think this comes from a couple of different mindsets. Number one is, I know what I need to do, I just need to do it. And so that could be right. And therefore, the
Yeah,
blind spot is, well, how do you know it's the right thing to do? And who's done it before? Who could you learn from? Who could I model? As we've shared before, success leaves clues. So, okay, what could we be doing better? Especially with men, because they think they can't ask for help and they don't want to invest in coaches or mentors. I mean, it's very different now, but certainly in the past it was more prevalent. And so not asking for help or guidance or investing in experts to help you accelerate growth is definitely a big blind spot. Another one would be underestimating the power of your network. So we hear that we are the sum of the 5 people we spend most time with. You know,
yep.
there is some credibility in that. And I think people underestimate just how powerful that is. So whether that's family or friends or your staff or your business associates. So I can give you an example for myself, is that there was a period of a few years where I wasn't networking and really expanding my social interactions, engagement with other business professionals. Because at that time, I was focused on developing my people and helping to develop, say, that next, the succession plan, investing in the people who'd shown interest that they had aspirations to develop as leaders in the business. But what happens there is that You lower yourself if you're spending too much time and not being able to invest in the people that are more successful or better than you, so that you keep raising your standards, you keep raising your game, you keep engaging and being, as we've heard, right? If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Again, something that has a lot of validity and credibility. And so when I started to shift and balance that equation a little bit, again, I was putting myself into these rooms where, wow, I was overwhelmed at how little I knew and how much further I had to go or wanted to go to grow the business and, you know, follow that pursuit. And yeah, so they're two blind spots, I think.
Okay, so how can someone actually surround themselves with five really good people and remove the negative people out of their life?
Well, the first one is having clarity in what you want, and you have to get specific. It's not just about money, it's going to be the business, the lifestyle, and that will start to help you navigate towards those kinds of people that have what you aspire to achieve as well. That's the first one. Seeking out networks or communities of people that have a high majority of these people. So for me, one of my key networks of continuously learning and being in the right room is through EO. And EO is the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is just focused on growth, self-leadership, impact, family, and business. So it really resonates with me based on those values, but it's also that network of 18,000 entrepreneurs around the world that believe the same things, right? So we believe in the same values of growth, being hungry to grow, having that impact and wanting to grow not just our own businesses, but contribute to others as well. So find the network that resonates with you based on values so that you surround yourself with those exact type of individuals.
How can, like, the average person, after they identified what they want, how can they find a good network like that?
Well, the first thing is to research and look locally. The first one, so many different types of business organizations and networking events. You've got chambers of commerce, you've got tech startups, you've got founders, you've got different groups of individual. For example, take meetup.com, right? That's just one example where you've got a website that's dedicated to communities of like-minded people. So you pick your niche, you choose the areas that you want to connect with people, you join for free, and you turn up to events, and you start building rapport and establishing a network,
Okay.
right? That's where it
Well,
starts.
so let's talk about your daily routine. What are some daily habits or routines that you follow to maintain high performance in your life?
So a big part of my whole methodology of success and energy management and performance is around simplicity. So my morning routine takes me about 60 seconds.
Oh,
That's it. You will read online and obviously morning routines and formulas. It's all a trend and biohacking. And some people share their 90-minute, 2-hour marathon morning routine. And okay, that's great if it works for them. But I'm on the mindset that I want to just hit the ground running. So I want to keep my morning routine super simple, specific, and then just get on and eat the frog.
so what is your morning
Be as
routine?
efficient.
Like, what do you
It's
do in the
what
60 seconds?
Yeah, it's water and isometrics.
Okay. Could you explain what
That's it.
isometrics are?
So isometrics is a maximal motor unit contraction. So you're generating maximal force and getting maximal motor units, muscle fibers contracting that then force a neurological response. It forces dopamine. So it increases motivation, clarity, and focus. And of course, that motivation leads to determination to what's next.
And then
Yep.
throughout your day, after your isometrics and water, or even in the evening, like what do you do? Like, do you have certain routines?
So my routines in the evening are pretty consistent as well. I have a very brief feedback system, and that's what I have, what I call my power questions. So I go through and I ask myself 4 very simple questions that allow me to assess and evaluate my day, look at what I can improve, and then determine what my priorities are for tomorrow. All right. So that form of reflection is super important, that just builds momentum day by day and is aligned with compound interest, compound gains, 1% gains, small micro improvements on a daily basis. Because that also allows you to be able to download data and information out of your head to make sure that you're not overthinking and you're primed for good quality sleep. So it gives completion to the end of my day, but I don't need to overthink about things going to sleep because I've already set my intention on what my priorities are for tomorrow.
And are there any mindsets that you follow throughout the day?
Always. I think for me, over time, it's established as part of my behaviors and my identities. So I'm very aware of stress or emotion, and I can use that trigger to determine what action I need to take. So if I'm distracted or I'm procrastinating, I feel it. So I can stop, intercept, reassess what I'm doing, and then get back on track. I focus on controllables. So I don't
Okay.
panic. I'm able to maintain emotional control, and I don't get stressed on things that I cannot control. So we cannot control what happened in the past, and we cannot control the future. There's no point letting those things stress you out. You just bring it back to the present and focus on what can I control? What can I do right now? So there's many mindsets that are linked to that premise and that framework, and it keeps you grounded, it keeps you present, it keeps you stress free, prevents you from overthinking and overcomplicating life.
Okay. So, on a different subject about problems in the world, do you what's a big problem that you see is happening out anywhere in the world?
Well, I think the state of health of the modern, well, not just the modern world, is everywhere. It's global health is a massive concern. When we look at the causes of death from a poor lifestyle, many of these things are preventable. So when we can look at obesity and diabetes and cancer and heart disease is incredible. 30, 40 years ago, obesity rates were 3 to 5%.
What do you think
Obesity is
causes
like 60, 70%. And people overweight. And then we have diabetes in youth. And the percentage of teenagers and youth that are overweight is incredibly saddening.
Do you think it's the processed foods?
That would be one part of it for sure. It's the education system. It's the food and agriculture industry. It's big pharma. It's education in terms of media, right? And how media has influenced our behaviors. So there's many reasons that contribute to that, and it doesn't seem to be improving.
Could you explain that a little bit more with the education system?
Sure. So even at school, we had sausage rolls, meat pies, hot dogs, chips, Snickers available to kids in the school canteen, Coca-Cola, you name it. So education-wise, TV commercials, we're told that Fruit Loops, Cocoa Pops are healthy for us. So our parents buy them because they have vitamin E and vitamin C in it, right? So that's positioned and marketed as a healthy breakfast cereal for kids. So we learn to trust doctors, we learn to trust the media, and that is part of the problem, right? We're exposed to all of these processed foods and sugar. Another example would be that the US FDA pretty much demonized fats and a lot of healthy foods and said fat is bad, fat free is better. But of course, what did they do to improve the taste and the flavor? Was they replace it with sugar. And the food pyramid used to be seven, like the base of the food pyramid was 7 to 9 servings of carbohydrates, right? Grains, breads, cereals, and carbohydrates. So it was this massive shift, especially in the US, but globally, that led to an overconsumption of these types of foods, which leads to obesity, heart disease, diabetes. So they would be
What
two
can
examples of education.
what can someone do to combat this problem?
Educate yourself, number one. But before you even start educating, you need to look at yourself and realize that there is a problem. As parents, you have a responsibility to educate yourself so that you can best educate your children. Right? If your children are overweight and they don't have a specific metabolic health condition, then that's negligence. And it is your responsibility to ensure that your children have access to education and healthy food and stay active and are not just stuck behind a computer indoors eating junk food,
Right.
living a sedentary lifestyle.
What do you think the root problem is of all the misconception of today's health industry?
I think the misconception is that it is expensive and it takes a lot of time and effort to be healthy. I think it's the complete opposite. One of my
Hmm.
frameworks, again in simplicity, is the 95-5 rule, which means I'll try to identify and focus on the 5% of things that are likely to lead to the outcome that I seek. That way you eliminate overwhelm and too many options and you get very specific and you keep it super simple. And so with that framework, you can apply it to anything.
What's something that you have applied it to, just as an example?
Morning routines, strength training, fitness, health,
Okay.
productivity, all of those key areas, time and energy management. And so even on the gym side of things, right, I've been through the whole process over 30 years, working out an hour a day, CrossFit, strength training, running, sports, whatever it might be. But my strength training now is 20 minutes, 3 days a week. It's a total of 60 minutes in a week.
And you're still getting the same results?
Yeah, I maintain and still get a little bit stronger, but I can still maintain, 11, 12% body fat and maintain my strength gains. And on the nutrition is easy as well, right? It doesn't need to be overcomplicated. So with
Just
nutrition, you don't need supplements, like focus on real food, focus on hunger,
okay.
and eat protein and
So,
vegetables. You can't go wrong.
what advice would you give someone to get ahead in their life and take control of it?
Number one, know what you want. Now, for some people, setting goals is difficult for them to answer. Sometimes for some people, it's easier to know what you don't want. So then you just ask a different question.
Right.
I don't want to live an average life. I don't want to be a low income earner. Okay, well, if you don't want that, what do you need to do to prevent that from happening? You see how that shifts?
Yeah.
It tells you what you need to do to avoid something rather than to achieve something. So you got to get clear on what you want. Maybe you need to get clear on what you don't want. And then you need to start taking action every single day on things that are going to lead you to that outcome. So get clear, take daily action, surround yourself with great, inspiring people, invest in coaches or education or mentors. Find the people that have already achieved what you want to achieve, model them, be ruthless and ferocious in that implementation of action, track your data, measure your results, dream big, and just focus on those 1% gains. I think if you do all of those things, you will achieve anything and everything you could possibly ever dream of and want in your life and make a positive impact on others. Because that ultimately is how you can also be successful, by helping as many people as possible to achieve their goals or solve their problems is naturally going to help you evolve and be successful as well.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Dan. So, how can listeners get involved and support what you're doing?
Great question. They can visit my website, which is dan.remon.com. So that's DANREON, like demon, but with an R. And you could also go to my 2-Minute Coach podcast, which is number 2minutecoach.com. And that's where I have 2-minute snippets sharing growth tools and frameworks and systems that's easy to digest in just 2 minutes a day. So that's 2 platforms. And you can also find me on Instagram at instagram.com/dan.remon.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. It was nice talking to you.